The sun had set on the small town of Eerie, casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets. Gerald, Jesse, and Diane had all decided to investigate the abandoned mansion at the edge of town. The old Victorian-style structure towered above the trees, casting an eerie shadow over the surrounding area. As they approached the mansion, a feeling of unease took over them. The gate creaked open and they stepped through, hearing the sound of the heavy iron gate clang shut behind them. The front door was open, and a cold breeze brushed past them, sending shivers down their spines. They entered the mansion, and the foyer was in complete darkness. Jessie reached for her flashlight and turned it on, revealing antique furniture, dusty paintings, and cobwebs covering every surface. The air was thick with the smell of decay and mildew. The three companions made their way through the ground floor, checking every room and finding nothing but old, broken furniture. As they headed upstairs, they heard an unexplainable sound, like a strangled cry coming from an adjoining room. They rushed to the source of the sound, which led them to what looked like a torture chamber. The walls were lined with cages that contained mangled corpses of animals, a strong odor of death emanating from them. Jessie's flashlight caught the reflection of two glowing eyes in the corner of the room, but before they could investigate further, something knocked Diane to the ground. As Gerald and Jessie helped Diane up, they were all overwhelmed by a sense of panic. The air itself seemed to have turned heavy, and an indistinguishable force pushed them towards the door. They made their way back to the foyer and huddled together to catch their breath. Suddenly they heard footsteps creaking on the stairs behind them. Gerald quickly turned around, brandishing a rusty metal pipe he had found earlier. As the footsteps approached, a figure emerged that was neither human nor animal. Its skin was leathery and black as coal, with a pair of bat-like wings on its back. Large white eyes glittered in the dim light, and its long, sharp claws clicked against the marble floors. The creature let out a deafening screech, sending pain shooting through their ears. Jessie rushed towards the door, but the creature swooped down, claws extended, and slashed at her arms. The wound was deep, and blood gushed down her arms, staining her shirt and trousers. Gerald swung his pipe at the creature, but it had already flown out of reach, circling overhead. Diane rushed to Jessie's side, trying to help her, but they were all frozen in terror. The creature continued its screeching, and the sound became louder and more intense. Suddenly, the floor quaked, and the walls trembled as if they were about to collapse. The creature seemed to feed off the fear and panic, and its eyes became brighter and more intense. Gerald suddenly remembered something he had read in a book on the paranormal. He whispered to his companions, "We have to face our fears. That's the only way we can defeat it." Jessie nodded bravely, and Diane took a deep breath. They closed their eyes and focused on their fears, letting them wash over them. The creature's screeches became louder and more intense, but they stood their ground. Suddenly there was a bright flash of light, and the creature let out a final screech before disappearing in a puff of smoke. The mansion was silent once again, and the air was filled with the smell of sulfur. Gerald, Jessie, and Diane opened their eyes and looked around, relieved that the nightmare was over. They quickly made their way out of the mansion, never looking back. As they walked back to town, they couldn't believe what had just happened. They had faced their fears and survived, and they knew they would never forget their adventure in Eerie.